27.
Okay, right. Sorry about the slight delay. Let's go. Like I said, next week, unfortunately, there is no share. I have an unavoidable event with the chief rabbi. I'm really sorry. I can't. It's whatever. I just can't. Well, these things happen. It wasn't something I had control over. Let's put it like that. So we are going to begin, but then after that, Mitzvah we will continue until Tisha B'Av. The last year Mitzvah will be in 9 days, and then we will resume when we will. Yeah, we'll give. So we'll go up to the then we'll resume. Yeah, not the bank holiday Monday, the week after.
It's not the last year.
No, just that next week there's no share, but then there is during the 3 weeks. Okay, and then we have a break until Elul. That's okay. Pretty much. Wait a second. All right. So we are up to. Yes, that's right. We did these right. Okay, so that's right. Rav Nachman and Rava. So very interesting bit. So therefore, basically, let's go over the story. Someone said to someone else, this is the bottom of Chav Tesam base. We basically almost finished the Omid. Rav Nachman, someone said to someone else, my boy is by base, so what are you doing in my house? Basically. And he said to him, I bought it from you. And I've been there for 3 years. I've used it properly, normally. So he said to him, no, what do you mean? I was there. I was in an internal room. I was hiding. You didn't see me. I was there, and that's why I didn't object, he said, because I live there. I live in another room further inside, and I pass by all the time, so obviously I didn't bother objecting. And therefore, you've got no chazaka, because chazaka is based and depends on the ability to make a mechar, or the fact that you did not make a mechar when you should have made a mechar. You should have objected, isn't it? Yeah. So he says that's why I didn't. So he came in front of Nachman. Go and prove, go and clarify, go and explicate, go and explain prove your achila. In other words, you've lived there for 3 years without the other guy who's been there with you, right? Okay. In other words, like every chazaka of 3 years, you have to bring eidim that you've had a proper chazaka. And what's the difference here between regular chazaka of Gimel Shonim? Because regular chazaka of Gimel Shonim, you just bring eidim for 3 years. Here, this is comparable to the case we said previously on the previous Omid, that when you're challenged, so we ratchet up what you need to prove. And here as well, we do the same thing. We push it up a notch. We say, for you, it's not good enough just to bring eidim that you were there for 3 years. You're going to have to bring eidim that you were there for 3 years without the other guy in the inside room, okay? Without anyone else passing you by. Rob? Then it's no chazaka. Because he's got a valid reason not to have challenged. And a valid reason which stands up in court not to have challenged, by definition, means you have no chazaka. Because your chazaka, your proof of ownership, is wholly dependent on the fact that he didn't object. That's the whole mechanism of chazaka. So if he has an alibi why he didn't object, you have no chazaka. Simple as that. You have to always think of chazaka, okay, chazaka Gimel Shonim, as 2 halves of a whole. It's the whole way through the parak, yeah? It's always 2 parts to it. There's 2 parts to it. My chazaka is a proof of ownership, but I cannot build my proof of ownership without the fact that you didn't object. And if you've got a valid alibi, you've got a good reason why you didn't object, such as I was on the moon. I mean, no, whatever. I was in a place where there was no possibility I could ever have heard you were there, right? Or I didn't object because it was obvious there wasn't a chazaka, such as the fact that I was always walking past every day. So obviously you weren't being machzik because I was there, right? Then you've got no chazaka.
Firstly, he was abroad. I mean, you can never prove it.
No, you can't, because we say news travels. Yeah. So that argument of being abroad is only going to work in a case where you can prove that news doesn't travel. And later on, the Gemora is going to talk about the places and where we say the news doesn't travel. For example, there were cases in our history where the southern part of Israel and the northern part, right, might have been as far apart as, like, China and the United States. Because they didn't travel, they didn't talk, they didn't travel, no one went between them. That was what it was like. Hud and Galil, they were like 2 separate places. I don't think it was because there was an animosity. We're not talking like the time of the Beis Hamikdash with the northern and southern kingdom. We're talking about like just because there were bandits and there were nasty people and people just didn't go. They just didn't travel between the two areas. That was just the fact. Okay. So then that's how it is, right? Now that's
look, it's basically saying you've got two things to do.
Yeah.
You have to prove A, that you were there throughout 2 years.
Yeah.
And more than that he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean he phrases it as one thing. Very Rashi phrases it as that you have to prove you were there for 3 years alone. It's the same thing as you're saying, but it's not two things. You have to prove that you were there for 3 years by yourself.
To show that someone's not there, you have to basically bring witnesses that they never saw. How would you do that?
No, you just bring witnesses that said we observed for 3 years that this person was there using the property, and we didn't see anyone else.
I'm saying
Yeah.
didn't see him.
Yeah, we saw him. He was there. That's all we just saw him. Yeah, we just saw him. That's right. Now, Omali Rava said to Rav Nachman, "Hoki dinner, is this the halacha? Motzei mechaver olav haraya." That's not the rule. The rule is motzei mechaver olav haraya. Says Rava, if you have Eidim that you've used some for 3 years, we don't have to think that someone else was there. This is a new thing. Why do we have to be concerned that someone else was around? You've got chazaka for 3 years. Okay, you've been there for 3 years. Everyone agrees you've been there for 3 years, and everyone agrees that it's not everyone agrees. He doesn't agree that. Sorry, he does not agree that he sold it to you, obviously, right? He doesn't agree that. He doesn't agree he sold it to you, right? But he agrees that you were there for 3 years, and you've got Aiden you were there for 3 years. So Rava says, as soon as you've got that, you are now considered, in terms of the halachas of motzei mechaver olav haraya, you're muchzak, right? You've got the burden of proof is now falls to someone else if they want to get it away from you. To do that, they have to bring a proof. It's not good enough just to say, because I made this complaint, you've therefore got to go and strengthen your chazaka. It's not true. It's not true. So it's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky because does Rava really say he's got a valid chazaka? Yeah, I think you're right. And that's the easiest way of learning it. Yeah. He's muchzak. He's got a chazaka. Yeah.
He's not denying that the guy is there. He's not denying.
That's true.
So what is Rava saying? We accept your chazaka as it stands.
We accept your chazaka, Rava says, because you have satisfied the burden of proof that rests on someone who wants to prove chazaka. You've done your job.
Except that the guy, Uri, has got to figure it out.
So that's why I think Rashi. So that's why Rashi adds the words "Chayol v'lo shomanu bilti hayo." Since this is a brand new revolutionary thing that we've never heard of before, that you're living in the house. In other words, Rava's saying there are limits to the type of excuse and claim you can have, and it's not a valid alibi. That's the point. You're right. That's the point, right? It is fundamentally different, says Rava, to the case where he says, I didn't see you there during the night, like the previous onwards. When he didn't see you during the night, that's a reasonable thing to say, to get up in Beis Din and say. And therefore we say, look, you've got to prove 3 full years. The guy's saying you were never there at night, so you're going to have to prove you were there at night. Fine. But to come up and say, I was living in the house, and no one's ever heard of that before, it's like a bizarre thing to say, right? Think about it. It's a bit of a strange thing to say. After 3 years, you come along in Beis Din and you say, I didn't object because I was living in the house. No one's ever heard of that. It's a new thing, right? It's a new idea. You can't come along and do that, says Rava. You want to do that? No problem. Bring a proof. Yeah. We will believe you if you prove it. You can't come up with some outrageous claim. That's what Rashi says. The first time I heard about it was today. You can't go with some outrageous claim and expect us just to follow you blindly.
So why are you classifying that scenario as outrageous?
Think about it logically, right? Logically, it is a bit weird. It's a bit of a weird thing to say.
Just for my clarification, saying basically the Torah is saying I never made a claim that the Nitan was living in my property,
Right.
because I myself was living So is that what you're saying is the claim?
Whose claim? The tone, no, you mean the Ma'ara. Not the tone. Don't confuse, be careful about the tone and the Nitzan.
So,
Who's the tone, who's the Nitzan?
so I'm saying
The tone is the person who's being machzik, right? You might want to come here.
saying I never challenged because there was nothing to challenge.
Yeah.
Because I
That's
myself
right.
have been there.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, but why is that an outrageous claim?
Because since we've got Aiden for 3 years, that you've been in the house for 3 years, okay? And we never heard of such a thing before that anyone else was living there.
So you're saying that the
You have to prove it. You have to bring some proof.
You're saying that there are Aiden that are saying that.
Yeah, that's clear. Everyone agrees they're Aiden. We know they're Aiden. No one disputes that. There are Aiden who say this guy was there for 3 years.
But then in that scenario anyway, then there's.
Yes, that's right. It should, the default should be.
Morakama versus versus the person who's claiming that they.
Is when there's no Aiden.
It's yeah.
No, not at all, not at all. On the contrary.
Unless already they've now
on the contrary, I have to bring Aiden for 3 years, because otherwise, how can I prove I was there for 3 years? So I'm challenged to bring Aiden. That's normal. That's normal. Bring Aiden, you were there for 3 years. That's reasonable. Yeah. It's not just me. What against you? I say I was there for 3 years. Who says I was there for 3 years? I'm challenging you. So you say you're there for 3 years. If no one challenges you, keep the field. This whole perek only exists when there's a challenge. Okay. If I say I own my house and no one argues and disputes the fact that I own my house, then I own my house. Right? Yes, there has to be a two sides. Yeah.
Saying you won't.
The machzik says,
You won't. Until
yeah, of course. He disputes it, of course. That's right.
And so we're basically saying.
And the question is, what do we do? Who does the burden of proof rest upon? That's how it is. Now, the Rashbam added another thing here, which is very important, which we explained last time, that the whole case is only when the Ma'ara has Eidus that the house used to be his. Okay? If there is no Eidus, they used to own the house, the Morikama, right? So then even Rav Nachman agrees that the Machzik is believed without any proof whatsoever, for a different reason. Okay? Because Hapesha also Hapesha Hete. I could have said it was always mine. You've got no proof it was ever yours. I could have said it was always mine, and therefore I'm believed to say I bought it from you. Okay, so he's believed without any proof at all, and even Rav Nachman will agree to that. I don't need a proof. If you don't have a proof that you used to own the land, okay, then I've got nothing to prove, because I didn't need to say I bought it from you. And the fact that I said I bought it from you, we say Apesha also Apesha Hete. I could have said it was always mine. So the fact that I said I bought it from you means I should be believed. Why not? That's a migo. Come to migo later. Yeah.
Isn't this just like almost like a game of trump cards? Right? So what you're saying is,
I wouldn't say it's a game. Everything. Is it? Every din Torah is like that. Every case that comes in front of Beis Din is multi-layered, and there's a lot, and there's sort of second guessing, and you're working out. You go this side and that way, and you have to consider both sides and how it plays out. 100%.
Say your point about the moral karma,
yeah,
and needing aid, is because without the aiding, then he's not a moral karma.
Yeah.
No.
Right?
That's
so
right.
Like
Once he says I bought it from.
Yeah.
He's made it the previous owner.
That's right.
So why would
that's called a pesha osa.
Yeah. So why would he need any proof?
That's right. And therefore we say we'll come up to this concept in more detail later on. We have a principle which is called a pesha osa, a pesha hita. If I put myself in a restrictive situation which no one forced me to be in, I can remove myself from the same situation. If I lock myself in a room and I have the key, I can unlock that room with the key. So I say I bought it from. I say basically I lock myself in a room by saying this house used to be yours, but I provide myself with the key to the room by saying I bought it from you. That's fine. That's not a problem. Why? Because I'll prove. I have a proof that I'm telling the truth. What's the proof? The proof that I'm telling the truth is that I could have said it was always mine. So logically, I'm telling the truth, because why on earth would I say that? Yeah, right. If I wanted a lie, I've got a much better lie. Yes? Yeah, it's amigo. That's right. It's exactly what it is. Yeah, exactly. It's about amigo. That's right. This parak is a lot about amigo. I want to see that. I want to carry on so we understand the reverse. We haven't finished, right? We haven't finished. Don't worry. All right. Varomi de Rova de Rova. Varomi de Rav Nachman. Last line on Choftes on the base. So we have a contradiction in Rava on Rava and Rav Nachman on Rav Nachman, because in other cases they seem to reverse their opinions. Tahu de Omalei lechavrei. Because someone said to someone else, there was a person who said to his friend, it's interesting they're all friends, isn't it? It's really interesting. The Gemora says, it's like a burst of confidence. Perhaps one day they will be friends again. Someone said to his fellow, I'm selling you all the property of Bar Sissin. Now, Bar Sissin is a person, an individual, and this man bought a lot of land from him. He bought a significant amount of land from Bar Sissin. And he says to someone else, I'm selling you all the property of Bar Sissin. Okay? Now, Havoya hi aro, there was a bit of land, the Havo Mikri de Bar Sissin, that was called de Bar Sissin. So logically, if it's called Bar Sissin, well, it's part of the job lot. You understand? I've got a lot of fields in Somerset, for example, and a significant portion of those fields, I don't. It's an example, yes? Bar Sissin are called Bar Sissin. Why are they called Bar Sissin? They're called Bar Sissin because I bought them from Bar Sissin. There's one nice piece of land by a stream where it's called Bar Sissin, but Omalei said to him, I love the Bar Sissin. That is not Bar Sissin property. That's not Bar Sissin, okay? But they just called it Bar Sissin, okay? But it wasn't actually property that was bought from Bar Sissin. So you understand what's going on here?
He doesn't want to sell it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're assuming that's the case, right? You're looking at it from a sort of skeptical eye, and you're saying here we have a seller who has identified one bit of land that he knows should really be included in the sale because he made a rash sale and said, I'm selling you all the property which is called Bar Sissin, okay? All property of Bar Sissin. And the assumption is that means all property that he bought from Bar Sissin. There's one piece of land that he really likes, presumably, he doesn't want to sell. So he says, no, that's not included. This land is not Bar Sissin. I didn't buy that from Bar Sissin. It's just got that name. Happens to have the same name. Just call that as a name. Common name. Yeah, nothing you can do about it, I'm afraid. Yeah, that's how it is, right? Also, the Kami Rav Nachman. Also, the Kami Rav Nachman. They came in front of Rav Nachman. So again, remember Rav Nachman. Okmo biyodo de lokeach. He gave it to the hands of the lokeach, the buyer. Okay, he gave it to the hands of the buyer. Now, what does that mean?
He's saying that was.
Yeah, it was included in the plan I'm giving you.
It's not red countenance. The extraordinary coincidence.
Put the aircon on, I think.
So, no.
Put it on it with the ears cool.
Oh, you do turn it off? Do you want it off?
No.
Press the button. Press Press power.
To the right.
Yeah.
And the air. Yeah, press that.
There we are. Right. It could be it's on a time switch. Okay. Yeah. Now, okay, so he says, what does Rav Nachman say? Rav Nachman, yeah, also coming Rav Nachman, he gave it to the Lokeach. That means to say, Rav Nachman says that we assume this was included in the property that was to be sold to Bar Sissin. Okay? Omele Rava. Rava says, Hachi, is that the right halacha? Someone who wants to bring a proof, yeah, someone who wants to take something away from someone else has to prove it. How do you know that it's really part of the Bar Sissin property just because it's called Bar Sissin? Maybe the seller's telling the truth. Maybe it's just the name, but it wasn't part of the property he bought from Bar Sissin. Now, at first glance, you think, what's the problem? They each say the same thing. But the problem is that the cases are reversed. The cases are the reverse because Rav Nachman earlier on said who is the one who owns, he says, Zilbar Achiloscha. You have to prove that it's really yours. He says to the machzik, the one who is holding the land, the one who has got has got a chazaka on the property. He says to him, you need to prove it. What does he do here?
He said it's included in the set.
Yeah, that means he doesn't go, what? He's taking the reverse position. He's saying to the person who's buying it, okay, it's yours. The one, think about it. There's one in the original case, Rav Nachman takes the position that if you are open yourself to challenge in terms of ownership, yeah, you're challenged in your ownership, you have to prove that you're the owner. Here, he says to the Kech, no, it's yours. You don't have to prove you're the owner. So you're going to have to split hairs between them. Okay, but the point is that he seems to take an opposing position. Over here, he says, if you're challenged, you have to prove it's really yours. Here, you're challenged. The seller is challenging you and saying, this was never Bar Sissin property. It just happened to have that name. And Rav Nachman says, that's not a challenge. You have it. It's fine. You don't have to prove anything. We can assume it's yours. So it is a reverse position. Now you can start telling me, okay, but the case is not it. We'll find out. Let's see if we can split between the cases. But that principle is on. And Rava is also the reverse. If you hold a mitzvah mechaver olav horaya, like he says here, let me say I'm machzik, I'm muchzik in the land. You want to take it away from me? Prove it. So why is it that Rava says here? Hamotzi mechaver olav horaya. Who's hamotzi mechaver olav horaya? What? The buyer is hamotzi mechaver olav horaya. Why should the buyer be hamotzi mechaver? Why should the buyer be that? Right? Because there Rava said it's in the hands of the buyer, right? Over here, Rava said hamotzi mechaver olav horaya. Let me say the buyer has it. And the seller, the buyer has it over here effectively, and the seller wants to get it out of his hand. That's what he wants to do. And Rava says, you're going to have to prove it. And here, Rava says the opposite. It's in the buyer is the one being motzi from the seller. The way the Rashbam learns it, the truth is, the Rashbam just puts it very simply. The Rashbam says the contradiction is, who is the stronger position, the seller or the buyer? That's it, simple. I explained it too complicated. No, but if you break it down to the simple facts, in both cases we have effectively a buyer and a seller, right? If we go with the story of the person who is being machzik, he's putting himself in the position of being a buyer. He's saying, I bought it from you. Okay. Yeah. No. Well, that's no. Okay, but hold on a second. Leave that aside for a second. Rav Nachman says in the first case, the seller is the one who is in the stronger position. That's what Rav Nachman says. Here, Rav Nachman says the buyer's stronger. Rava here in the first case says who is in the stronger position, right? Who is in the stronger position according to Rava? So when what the seller, right? Yeah, because he says olav horaya. No, so the buyer. The buyer's in a stronger position, and here he says the seller's in the stronger position. The buyer has to prove that it's not Bar Sissin. So that's the contradiction. Who do we say has got the upper hand, the buyer or the seller? Now you'll tell me that there are differences between the cases. Well, that's what the Gemora is going to try and examine, right? Whether we can split between the cases. But if you look on the surface, it seems to be a contradiction. Yeah.
Isn't this the new case that you've introduced to bring this disproof or this contradiction? A scenario where it's not really appropriate to use a nosh of Musa, because here it's like effectively actually saying, whereas the Chazaka scenario that we're talking about or trying to grapple with is where the buyer has an established position of Chazaka.
Where is there an established position?
Well, he's coming along and saying, I've lived there all of the time, right? Okay. But the point is, we're talking about where they're disagreeing about what happened previously, i.e. in the past. And therefore, what we're saying is the person who is now with, now has the house, now has the
yes, yeah,
has the upper hand because he has established chazaka, whereas
You'll go.
This case is not. There is no established.
Okay. So again, you're coming towards the answer to the Gemara. The Gemara is going to have to answer at least part of it, right? In making a chiluk between chazaka. Okay, so leave it for a second. You're not on the wrong track. So you're on the right track. Okay, absolutely. Let's see the Rashbam how we answer the question. The Gemara says Kash to Rav Rava Kash Rav Nachman Rav Nachman. It's a question. It's steering of Rav and it's a steering of Nachman. Let's see the Rashbam, top of the Omud. Kol nichti debei bar sisin. Koloma means to say Kol osam kalkosh shekunisini osa odm sheshmer bar sisin. All that land that I bought from this gentleman called Bar Sisin. That was the case. That's what he said. I'm selling to you. The Mikaria debei bar sisin kach korin loy. This is what they call it. The Ein Yodua, but it's wasn't known im kanom bar sisin, whether he bought it from bar sisin. That was the doubt over the piece of land. And that's why it was called. That's why it was called that. Or maybe it just happened to have the same name. The Yerushi Lo Me'avosno. And it was just inherited from his ancestors. You're right. Paul is smiling because this is a classic legal issue is where there's a debate over a clause in a document, right? No, am I right? I'm sorry, putting words in your mouth, but pardon?
Yeah, I guess right.
No, contract law.
You got to construe the words.
Exactly. What is it? What ordinary meaning was? What would the man on the Clapham omnibus say? The reason why my law, yeah. What would the reasonable man interpret these words? Whatever. Well, it's a classic question. Any debate over a phrase, over a contract, right, is, okay, so what does this mean? And here we have a genuine problem because it seems to be that the other land there was no question mark over. Everyone knew. It was obvious. It was called Bar Sisin. It was known that it was bought, that he bought from him. There's one poor piece of land where we generally have no idea. And he's challenging it and saying, the way the Rashbam phrases it is Ein Yodua. It's not known. It is not known. Kind of a little bit of an implication that the other property was known. This property is there's an objective doubt about it. You could say there's only an objective doubt because he's saying it. He's saying that it's not, right? But maybe, yeah. It could be just because he says it. He says that's the case. Either way, we have a doubt over this piece of land, right? We don't know what it were. We don't. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't have in those days a land registry. Yeah, they didn't have land registry and stuff. Then you would be able to prove it. Yeah. Put in the hand of the the first time as the reason is to on the lady they ramily glued love to be basisini. Okay, that it's upon him to reveal that it's not Bar Sisin. That's why he gave it to Lekech. You have to prove, you the seller need to prove this is not Bar Sisin, because if it's called Bar Sisin, the logical inference is that you also bought this land from Mr. Bar Sisin. That's why it's got the name. Yeah. Amalei Rava said, Dino Hochi, is this the halacha l'tzia misofek mitachas yad hamoichash muchsuk, to remove it in a scenario of doubt from the seller who is muchsuk? That's not the right thing to do, says Rava. The buyer is being moitzi. He has to bring a proof, as a proof to his zechus. Because he has no proof, he can lose out. And here, see, the Rashbam says very simply, the question is like this. Above Moki la Rav Nachman biyad hamoich. Above, Rav Nachman gave it to the seller. V'rova biyad hamoich. And Rava gave it to the buyer earlier on. And here the other way around. So the Gemara asked the question, not looking into, at the question stage, the Gemara doesn't go into the details of, where there was chazaka and here's no. It doesn't do that. The Gemara says the contradiction is that why is it that in one case Rav Nachman favors the buyer, and one case he favors the seller, and the other case Rava questions the buyer, and the other case he questions the seller. And you're going to ask me, didn't the Gemara know that there's differences between the cases? Like, why are you asking this big question? They're not exactly the same, are they? There are variables that are blatantly obvious, you might ask. What's the answer? Think about it. There's enough similarity, but more than that. Even if the Gemara knows where it's going to get to, by asking the contradiction in this way, we will clarify both the opinion of Rava and of Nachman. We will set the parameters of what they actually hold. It will deepen our understanding of Rava and Rav Nachman. In other words, you understand, Johnny, do you understand what I'm saying? You're struggling with this because you're saying There's difference. The Gemara knows there's a difference because of chazaka, but by asking it as a contradiction, we will establish exactly where Rav is coming from, where Rav Nachman's coming, and that's why the Gemara sets it up in this way. That's a simple way of learning a sugi like this, right? It's not that we don't know the difference; we do. Set up as a contradiction to get to the differences. So the Gemara says like this: to Rava lekashya. It's no contradiction in Rava. They're totally different. Really, Rava always is consistent. Rava says you go after the muhsuk. Whoever is muhsuk, you go with him. And there are two different people who are muhsuk. Okay, over there, who is the muhsuk? What? No, the first case, the buyer. Yeah, the occupant, the buyer, right?
Yes. So like,
Yeah. Hossam is the bar sisin case, right? Over there, the case of bar sisin is the seller. The seller is in the property, okay? In the property, okay? And because the seller is in the property, Rava turns around to the lokeach and says, even if you think that the logic is with you because the property is called bar sisin, and therefore it stands to reason that you were sold this piece of land, but you're not muhsuk, you're not in the property, you're trying to get it, so you're going to have to prove it. Whereas in the first case, it's the other way around. You're muhsuk. Everyone agrees you've got 3 years. You've got chazaka. So whoever wants to take it out of you, the lokeach, are you with me? Yeah, it's gonna have to prove it. So Rava's consistent. Rava says you go after the muhsuk. All right. That's how you resolve. Everyone understand that? Yeah, that's how you resolve the question in Rava, right? Now, the Rav Nachman Nami lo kasha. Rav Nachman is also not a contradiction. Why? Hossam over there, that's bar sisin. Kiven do omalei the bar sisin, the bay bar sisin. Since he said to him the property of bar sisin, umikario the bay bar sisin, and it's called bay bar sisin, or lady day rami ligruri the love bay bar sisin here. The onus is on the seller to reveal that it's not bay bar sisin. You're going to assume it's bar sisin because it's like a duck that walks like a duck and talks like a duck. It's probably a duck. This is bar sisin. It's called bar sisin. He said, I'm selling you bar sisin, right? And it's called bar sisin. So it is not a massive jump to say that he probably bought the property from bar sisin. You agree, Shmuel? You agree, right? No, it's not going to go massive, right? You don't need like great powers of reasoning to make that conclusion. So for him to object to that, he's got to prove it. Okay? So over here, he's no better. This is very clever, this. Rav Nachman says, this guy's got a chazaka. He's no stronger than someone who's got a shtar. Let's say I come along with a shtar, proving that you sold it to me. Would we not say to him, establish the truth of your document, and then you can keep the property? In other words, what does chazaka do? It's a raya. It's a proof that you own the land. Well, it's not better than a shtar. You're not stronger. Because you squatted in the land for 3 years and you lost your document, you don't get to be better than someone who managed to keep the document. Do you understand? If I have a document, if you sold me a piece of land and I have a piece of paper that proves that you sold me the land, right? Then that's great, right? But if your document is challenged in Bastin, so I've got a shtar, okay, and someone claims it's a forgery, can happen. Take you to court. You forged the papers. I had a case today in Bastin. Seriously, it happens all the time. I had a case today, and I got a phone call about a case. We verified Jewish status to someone. I got a phone call from a reliable third party that is seriously concerned about a case of forgery. I don't know the circumstances. It's very worrying. It's someone who it's a very strange story. It's a strange case. It's nowhere remotely near anything connected. You would never work out it is. Yeah, it's an unusual case. Someone who wanted to prove their Jewish status a while back, whatever. It's a very far out story, whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah. They establish their Jewish status, and someone comes along with some piece of information claiming, I think it's highly unlikely they're right for various reasons, right? They come along with you get a phone call, and by the way, it's not a phone call from a random, like somebody's out to get it. It's not like, it's a third party who we have no reason to think it's a reliable source. It's not someone who we have any reason to think that they've got a vendetta or anything like that. They have a real question over how this person's story. As I think they're wrong because I think the investigation was done properly. It's always done incredibly thoroughly. I think it's highly unlikely, right? So what we gonna so what's gonna happen? No, so this is in this case I said you've got you're raising a question, right? Put it all out in an email, set out your evidence that you think this is a problem, because obviously we take Jewish status inquiries incredibly seriously. It's obviously really, really important. And set it all out, and then we'll examine it. We'll look into it. But the point is, if there's a real challenge, what are we going to do? You're going to have to prove the documents. So if there was a real concern that something which does happen occasionally, it's very, very rare. My predecessor in the role that I'm doing with marriage authorization, or my shinny, I think used to keep. It must probably be this. And he showed me one in the drawer of the desk where he said he used to keep a forged ksuba. It was a forged ksuba. It was someone had copied and pasted and photocopied very cleverly the top part and the bottom part. Well, no, it was no. I'll tell you what it was. I think it was a first marriage. The first marriage had been in an Orthodox ceremony or something like that, and the second one had not been. It was reform, so they had forged the ksuba by putting in the names, and it was discovered because this is why it pays to be so thorough, because you've gone back to the original records. It wasn't a chuppah that was under us. It was under another Orthodox organization, and we had checked out the records. And have you got a record of this marriage, which we normally do? Like, even if someone presents a ksuba, if it's not one of our ksubas, normally, unless we have reasons, whatever, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, we go to some background like work, whatever. We have to make sure we verify exactly the ksuba. And they said, that's really strange, because we've got the name of the man, but it's a different woman.
No.
So you understand what had happened? The second spouse wasn't Jewish, right? So he put in a false name in the original ksuba to pretend. Look, that's incredibly rare, okay? It's like the nightmare story, right? That's incredibly rare, okay? But it can happen, okay? So sometimes you have to validate your document. If your document is challenged in court, you have to validate it. So here as well, you have a chazaka. Here as well, you've got a chazaka, you know better than a shtar. So you've got to validate your chazaka. Someone's challenged your chazaka, you've got to validate it, okay? So there you are. Let's see the Rashbam. You got it? Yeah? Third of the way down. You see it? Just in every place, he puts it in the hand of the muhsuk. And over there, the moicher, the seller, is koi benichsei, is in the property. And over here, the lekech is in the property. It's a very simple Rava. In other words, Rava, there's nothing else to say. Rashbam doesn't add anything else. Rava simply goes after the muhsuk. Whoever's muhsuk, that's it, right? Rav Nachman's a bit more complicated. Rav Nachman says, next Rashbam, given since the Kole Alma correlate to Beibar Sisin, everyone calls him Bar Sisin. Everyone calls calls it Beibar Sisin. V'nirin advorim shelafichu nikreis kain. And it seems to be that it was called so shekanah mi Beibar Sisin, because he bought it in Beibar Sisin. V'hu Omar lav mi Bar Sisin lokachtia, and he is the one who says, I did not buy it from Bar Sisin. He is it's upon him to reveal Alahavi Raya, to bring a proof to Lav Bar Sisin Lokha. He did not buy it from Bar Sisin. And if he brings proof, witnesses, that it was called so, it was called this, but it was just the name, but it wasn't part of those fields that he bought from Bar Sisin. Then we put it in his hand, then we give it to him. Because it's obvious to us, right? That it's obvious to us that in other words, we give it back to the seller, right? That which he said to him, I'm selling you the property of Beibar Sisin. It's obvious to us that this is what he's saying. The property I bought from him, below and not the property I did not buy from him. Even though they happen to be called the same name. This is what it seems to be, says the Rashbam, the Gemora. This is how to understand the Gemora. Do you understand? The Rashbam sets out for us here. Again, you've got to get used to the language of the Rashbam. It's quite a lengthy. He phrases things in a lot. There's a lot more words than you find in a Rashi. That's the style of the Rashbam, right? What the Rashbam is saying is as follows: we have to we establish the following simple fact. It is not under question. It is not part. It's not something we question. That we know for a fact that the person only intended to sell the property that he bought from Basra. That's clear. That's not up to the debate. You with me? That's not a question. You can't debate that. That's not up for debate, right? When he said, "I'm selling you the Bay Basra," he meant the property he bought from Basra. Okay, because that's the case. Okay, if he can prove that this property was not bought from Bar Sissin, okay, and it was just called the same name. In other words, he brings Aiden that this property was inherited from his ancestors. It just happened to have the name Bar Sissin. Then he can keep it.
Well, we got into the scenario of having support from a third party. I thought we were just getting the two parts to any question when it was this parcel of land was it included in the sale? Did it make a description or why the third party?
Because we're trying to say, it's not that you need a third party. It's that in the absence of a third party, then the seller's lost it. That's the point. The seller, Rav Nachman says to the seller, again, the Rav Nachman says to the seller, if you were thinking of this would be the same lahavdil in English law, I presume, right? If it says in the contract, I'm selling you all the land I'm selling you all the Bar Sissin land, all the Bar Sissin property, right? You're going to assume that every land that's got a big sign on it saying Bar Sissin is obviously going, right? As part of Bar Sissin. You're not going to start, you're not going to start having having debating anything unless I can prove that it's not. Yeah, does that make sense? And that's what we're saying. We're not bringing in a third party because we're trying to introduce a third party. We're just saying the only way you're going to get out of this, okay, and you're going to be able to keep the bit of land that you'd like to keep, is if you prove that it was just called Bar Sissin, but it was never bought from Mr. Bar Sissin.
That's the seller trying.
Yes, that's it exactly. However, says Rav Nachman, here is a different story. Here, in the first case, in our primary case, the case where the man was living inside the house, here I'm being challenged. My chazaka is being challenged. How's it being challenged? Because I'm saying, the other guy's saying, right, the person you say you bought it from is saying, no, I wasn't ma'areh because I was always there. Says the Rashbam, Mira Aminon Lei, time shtarcha. Will we not say to him, establish or shtar? Since the seller wants to disqualify it, and the chazaka of 3 years comes in place of a shtar. That's what it does. And since the seller objects, criticizes, complains about the chazaka, and says it's not a chazaka, this person needs to bring edim that his chazaka is complete, is solid, right? Okay. That he did, the other guy didn't live there with him. That's what he's going to have to prove. Okay, that's the Pesach Halacha. One second, we'll get to that in a second. Do you understand that? Do you understand this? Do you understand what we're saying? Yes? You know what I'm saying? Rav Nachman says, again, how we resolved it, we've clarified now, both Rav's opinion and Rav Nachman's opinion. Rav holds, go after the muchzak. I don't care about anything else. Whoever's muchzak, okay? Whoever's muchzak. I've been there 3 years, I've got 8 been there 3 years, I'm muchzak. You want to challenge it, you bring a proof. Okay? Yeah? You want to challenge it, right? In the second case, who's the muchzak? Going to Rav, who's the muchzak? The seller. I'm muchzak. You're trying to get doesn't matter that even if the logical inference is Bar Sissin means Bar Sissin, doesn't make a difference. You're the motzi, so you've got to prove it. Tough, very simple. Rav Nachman says, I'm not going after muchzak. I'm not. It's not as simple as that. We have to look at the facts of each case. And in the first case, the facts of the case are you're trying to use cheskas kibul sholim as a raya, as a proof instead of a shtar. So we don't put you on a pedestal above a shtar. And if someone comes and challenges the shtar with a reasonable claim, and he considers it a reasonable claim, and says, actually, your shtar is not so strong, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to do Makayim a shtar. How are you Makayim a shtar? You basically bring Eidim that testify that either, I think, it's discussed elsewhere, either the Eidim themselves, they're on the shtar, or I think other Eidim who can also testify that the shtar is an accurate shtar, whatever. You've got to prove you're Makayim a shtar. Same thing here. You're going to have to prove that your chazaka of Gimel Shonim is solid. How are you going to do that? You're going to bring Eidim that you were alone there for 3 years. Whereas in the case of Bar Sissin, In the case of Barsisin, it's not like in the case of Barsisin, the facts support, right, the buyer. Even though the buyer is not muhsar, the facts clearly support the buyer. Well, it's a sell by exactly. It's a sell by description, and the description fits the buyer's position. The buyer comes along and says, "I'm buying Barsisin." There's probably this called Barsisin. Well, it's yours.
Unless you can prove to the contrary.
Yeah, unless the seller can prove to the contrary. That's it. So that's how it is. Now, Bahani Tree Uvdi says the Rashbam in these two cases, Sviralon Rav Nachman, we paskan like Rav Nachman, the Hilchas Kavose Bedina, because Allah is like him in Din. The Chaim Perskin Pirushi Rabbi Chanino Ish Rome. He says in the Pirushim of Rabbi Chanino, the man of Rome, he also paskin this way as well. So there you are. So generally speaking, Rav Nachman, you need to remember this really for the whole of Basra and also of the sea and everywhere else. It's very, very strong. You know that, yeah? I just want to say I've got my note here. You know that. He's very strong, right? Rav Nachman. Hilchos Rav Nachman Medina. Rav Nachman's got a very strong position when it comes to dinim. Like Choshen Mishpat. Where is it? If there's on the base. No, Lamed Aleph. Interesting. Rashash says it could be the correct text should be Rabbi Rabbeinu Hananel Ishroni. Okay. All right.
Why do we go? Because just
No. It's a klal. It's a klal in Shas. It's not that we are weighing up Rav and Rav Nachman and saying Rav Nachman's opinion here seems more sensible than Rav. No, it's not like that. It's a klal. They're klal psak. Yeah, it's a rule. Hilchos Rav Nachman Bedini. Yeah, exactly. Rules. Exactly. Like a buy and Rava, Hilchos Rava, you know, a buy and only Al-Kagam, through 6 cases, exactly. This is a rule. Yeah. I think Rav Nachman was a Dayan. I think the Gemora says Rav Nachman Dayan of Anochis La'im Kedudin. I think that was what it is. He was a Dayan himself, so he went down to the depth of the judgment. I think so. Yeah. Okay, we've got a few minutes to start the next case. Now, someone said to someone else, my boys by Besa. What are you doing? What are you doing inside the house? My house. Someone said to him, same thing as before, same setup. I bought it from you, and I lived in it for 3 years. I've used it for 3 years. Omalei said to him, Bashuki Baroi Havoy. So again, he's now saying a different reason why your chazaka is no good. I was in distant marketplaces. I wasn't anywhere near, and therefore I wasn't able to make a machal. I wasn't able to object. I was far away on business. Omalei said to him, Isli Sadi, I've got witnesses to Kol Shata every year have a osis Tlosin Yomi. You used to come 30 days every year. You should have objected. Omalei said to him, Tlosin Yomi, for Shekoya V'Turidna, 30 days? Do you know what it means? I live here and I come here only 30 days a year. Do you know what I was doing those 30 days? You'd think maybe he was like, coming home, meeting his wife and children. No, I was busy in the marketplace, right? I was coming back for 30 days. What was I doing? I was bringing all the merchandise, all the pots and pans that I spent 11 months of the year buying. What do you think I was doing when I came home? I was selling them. So I didn't have time to go and object. No, you don't think so?
No, the guy with Chazaka, he's not claiming bringing evidence that he was there. He's saying you were there for 30 days a year. Should have objected. He's not looking for evidence either to show that he was actually.
You're asking why is he challenging it this way?
Yeah.
How do you want him to challenge it?
To prove that he was there for 3 years.
It's not going to help him. Because again, there's always the two sides of the coin. Even if I prove I was there for 3 years, if it was really the case that you were away for 3 years, if you can prove you were away for 3 years, I've got no chazaka. Presumably. Well, okay, we'll have to. That's a problem. I have to come on to that. Let's assume that for the moment, right? But yeah,
okay.
And that's why he says it. Now, Omar Rava says, Ovid Inish to call Tlos and Yomi Torid B'Shukah. That is a reasonable thing for a person to say. People are sometimes busy for 30 days in the marketplace. That happens. That's what happens. Sometimes that happens, right? Let's see the Rashbam. My boys by base, Shakol Yodin Shishili oil. Everyone knows it was mine. Right? That's what he says. That's his claim. Shakol, interesting. Shakol Yodin Shishili. Everyone knows the house is mine. So why are you inside the house? Amalei said to my I was in far away. Be'eretz merchokim, very far away. Mokum she'ein hashayoros mitzuyos. There were no wagons, no travelers, no caravans. No one could bring the news that you were squatting in my land. V'lo yodati, I didn't know. Lakach lo mochisi. That's why I didn't object. But Tzman Pirkin, which I mentioned in the past, it says later on in our Mishnah, if he was in Yehuda and he made a chazaka in Golil, so the owner is in Yehuda, and the person makes a chazaka in Golil, ain't no chazaka. It's not a chazaka until he's in the same Medina, in that same kingdom, the same area. The Hovu Shayoros Mitsuyos, where there are wagons traveling between the two. Okay? It has to be Imo Medina Ba'osa Malchus. Basically, I think Malchus is under the same control authority, and then the same Medina is like kind of the same state or whatever, right? You've got to be in the same place where people are traveling and you could hear about it and therefore you didn't object. Inami, Ikola Okima. And now alternatively, you could say that this case is talking B'shas Chirum, a time of emergency. Ba'afila Ba'osa Medina could come by Pirkin. So later on in the Mishnah, it talks about in the Gemora, it talks about cases where it's a time of great war or strife or whatever, yeah, and people are not, you can't travel at all. No one travels, right? No one travels. If no one travels, the news doesn't travel either, okay? That's how the Rabbeinu explain it, like Rabbeinu Chananel. In a place where caravans are common, and there's no emergency, he can't say, I was far away. To Chaim alon b'pirkin, we hold in our perek, machzikin b'nichsei boreach. You can make a chazaka in the land of someone that flees, someone runs away. Why? Because the rule is the machar shele b'fonov have your machar. You're allowed to make a machar. You're allowed to object even if you're not in front of the person who's being machzik. You can make a machar on the other side of the world. Doesn't matter as long as they can travel. News can travel. V'itoin lo yodati shechzik ish ploni b'karka sheli. And if he makes a time and says, I didn't know that this person was being machzik in my land, and that's why I didn't object, Eino Neman, he's not believed. He's not believed to say that if he says, I didn't know this person was in my land. Because just like we say that a machar, that's not an objection, that's not in front of him, is a valid objection, because the chavra is slay, because your friend has a friend, the yom ruloy lemachzik, okay, and they will tell the person being machzik, mokain, omru lezeh she'adam echod machzik b'karka shaloi. So too, they're going to tell, okay, they're going to say omru lezeh, they're going to tell this person, okay, that someone is being machzik in his karka, kol v'sheyoros mitzuyos, since people are traveling. And this is the halacha. This is very straightforward, this Rishon. All he's saying is, right? You understand what he's saying is basically the setup of the case must be where there are travelers. Okay? If there are travelers, it works both ways. You can't claim that you didn't object because you were far away. Why can't you claim you didn't object because you were far away? Because you would have heard. And if you would have heard, you can object because your objection will also be heard, right? And therefore the whole case doesn't arise. It's not a valid thing to say, you know why I didn't object? Because I didn't know. Of course you knew. And just like you knew that he was machzik, you also could make a machar, and that would also be heard. So the case must be where no one's traveling. That's what we established in this Rashbam. No one's traveling, there's no way of hearing. And he says, I was in a place. So basically, when he says Bashuki Baroy, I was far away, it means I was far away when news does not travel. And therefore, I could not have known that you were machzik. And therefore, I also obviously, can't object, right? Because I wouldn't know about it, right? Okay. Now the Gemora says, let's do the last Rashbam. He says, B'shakoi have a turidno. So what does he say? He says to them, about 30 days used to come home. He says, what do you mean? Those 30 days, I was busy in the marketplace. I couldn't object. I had no time. Limkas cherosi, to sell my merchandise, velikmes acheres, and to buy other property, other merchandise. I had no idea you were living in my house. Now, the Rashbam has a problem with this, obviously. What's the problem? Where'd you sleep? Where'd you sleep those 30 days? Okay, going, says the Rashbam, the case must be Sheshlu bias acher ba'osaho here. He obviously has another house in that city. That he used to stay there all 30 days. He's obviously making the most of being away for 11 months. At least he can buy another property. So he's got, that's where he stays for those 30 days. Okay.
Still hear about it. He comes back. Could have been objected to travel.
No. So the point is that even if he hears about it, that Rava says this is a valid claim because, and it's no chazaka, because people sometimes spend all 30 days being busy in the marketplace and they simply do not hear about it. They don't hear about it. They don't. So
Because the whole point is that
no.
there's no traveling.
So look. Okay, so hold on a second. So look at the Yesh Meforshim. The Yesh Meforshim, we'll come back in a second. Some say it's not that you didn't know about chazaka. Some say b'shekoyav teridna, I was busy in the marketplace. I had no time to object. Afal pishodati, even though I didn't know that you were in my house. The eino nira be'enai. That doesn't seem right, says the Rashbam. Why? Because if you're in the city for 30 days and you know someone's in your house, you're going to object. You're going to find, how busy you are, right? You're going to find the time. Yeah, you're going to find the time to object. So the case must be that you had no knowledge. How is it possible to have no knowledge? That's your point. How can you have no knowledge? The answer is you can be. It's a maximum of 30 days. You say, right? You can have a situation where a person is so busy that is a valid argument to make, right? To say that you never heard. So you're going to say what's going to happen to the machzik? So unfortunately, the machzik here has lost it unless you can prove, for example, that the guy did it. Yeah, if you can prove that I don't know, someone knocked on his door the third Monday that he was there and said, you know this guy's in your property. Then exactly right. Maybe people who tell him or not. Yeah. So.
Yeah, he doesn't prove that he was there.
He has to prove that the original owner did know, and therefore his lack of objection proves that it's mine. That's right. Okay, good. See you. So not next week, week after, Mr. Chairman. Oh, do we?